Luna, a German shepherd of advanced years, resided in the silent canyons of a crumbling urban district, where the scent of neglect hung heavy in the air, mingling with the faint, sweet perfume of decay. Her once lustrous coat, a rich tapestry of sable and black, was now matted in places, dusted with the fine grit of abandoned lots and stained by the occasional mud puddle. Her movements, once fluid and purposeful, had taken on a creaking stiffness, each step a quiet testament to time's relentless passage and the aches that had become her constant companions. She moved with the slow, deliberate pace of a creature who had seen too much, endured too much, and expected too little. Her days unfolded in a monotonous rhythm, dictated by the sparse offerings of the world around her. Mornings began with the chill dampness seeping into her bones, followed by the quiet patrol of her chosen territory, a network of overgrown alleys, derelict warehouses with shattered windows, and the skeletal remains of what were once bustling marketplaces. She was a ghost in this forgotten landscape, her very presence a whisper of what once was. Her sustenance came from the mercy of forgotten scraps, a half-eaten burger bun discarded by a hurried passerby, the leavings from overturned bins behind a flickering fluorescent-lit diner, or, on truly fortunate occasions, a slightly bruised apple rolling from a delivery truck. Each morsel was savored, a brief reprieve from the gnawing emptiness that often resided within her stomach. Her eyes, once bright and alert, mirroring the keen intelligence of her breed, were now clouded with a profound sadness. They held the distant, haunted look of someone who had known loyalty only to be betrayed, devotion only to be cast aside. When children's laughter occasionally drifted from the distant, marginally cleaner streets, their joyful cries serving as stark counterpoints to the melancholic silence that enveloped Luna, her gaze would instinctively drift towards them. She would settle near a rusted chain-link fence, partially hidden by tangled weeds, and observe tiny figures, vibrant with unbridled energy, chased brightly colored balls, their innocence a stark contrast to Luna's weary existence. A flicker, barely perceptible, would cross her face, perhaps a ghost of a memory, a fleeting image of a time when she, too, had known the warmth of play, the joy of a child's outstretched hand. But the moment would pass, and her eyes would dim again, the invisible wall between her and their world solidifying once more. She had learned, through bitter experience, that attachment only led to pain, and so she kept her distance, a silent observer in a world that had forgotten her. Trust, a commodity once freely given, had long since eroded, replaced by a quiet, self-imposed solitude. She was a creature of habit and caution, driven by the primal need to survive and the deep-seated understanding that relying on others was a path to further disappointment. One particular afternoon, the sky, pregnant with foreboding, finally broke. Fat, heavy raindrops began to fall, initially scattered, then gathering momentum until they descended in a relentless downpour, drumming a mournful tattoo on the corrugated iron roofs and pooling in stagnant puddles on the uneven ground. Thunder rumbled in the distance, a low growl that mirrored the ache in Luna's joints. She sought shelter under the flimsy overhang of a collapsing lean-to, the meager protection offering little reprieve from the biting wind that whipped through the alleyways. The world became a blurred canvas of gray and brown, streaked with the glistening sheen of water. As the storm intensified, a faint, desperate chirping pierced through the drumming rain. It was a fragile sound, easily swallowed by the roaring wind, but to Luna's still sharp ears, it was unmistakable. Her head tilted, ears swiveling, a hint of her former alertness flickering to life. The sound pulled at something deep within her, a forgotten instinct that predated her current state of weary resignation. Driven by an impulse she barely recognized, she pushed herself to her feet, her stiff legs protesting with soft groans, and moved cautiously towards the source of the distress. She found it huddled precariously on the damp, debris-strewn ground near a collapsing brick wall, a tiny, featherless bird, barely more than a pink, trembling mass of flesh. It was a fledgling, obviously blown from its nest by the ferocity of the storm. Its large, unseeing eyes were wide with terror, its tiny beak agape, emitting those heartbreaking, desperate chirps. It was utterly vulnerable, a speck of life teetering on the brink of extinction against the backdrop of the raging tempest. For a moment, Luna hesitated. Her logical mind, honed by years of survival, told her to ignore it, to seek better shelter, to preserve her own meager energy. This was not her concern, but something else, an echo of a forgotten purpose, stirred within her. She saw not just a bird, but a creature in dire need, helpless and alone, much like she often felt. A memory, fleeting and indistinct, of a time when her life had meaning beyond mere survival, when she protected the vulnerable, tugged at her heart. Slowly, deliberately, Luna lowered herself to the ground beside the tiny bird. The wind lashed at her, plastering her fur to her skin, but she ignored it. With infinite gentleness, she nudged the fledgling with her wet nose, ensuring it was still alive. Then, with a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of all her sorrow, she curled her large body around the trembling scrap of life. Her fur, though damp and matted, offered a surprising warmth, shielding the bird from the torrential downpour and the icy bite of the wind. She lay there, unmoving, a silent, furry guardian against the wrath of the storm. Her powerful instincts, once directed at grander tasks, now focused entirely on the fragile existence beneath her. Hours passed, marked only by the shifting patterns of the rain and the slow descent of dusk. Luna remained steadfast, her large frame a living fortress against the elements. Her muscles ached, her joints stiffened further, but she did not stir. She occasionally nudged the bird, a soft, encouraging gesture, and would feel a faint tremor of life in response. As the storm began to subside, replaced by a fine, persistent drizzle, and the echoing drip of water from every surface, a small miracle occurred. The bird, no longer trembling, began to stir, its chirp stronger, more insistent. Luna gently uncurled herself, revealing the fledgling, now dry and seemingly revived. It looked up at her with a renewed spark in its eyes, its tiny head cocked. With a sudden burst of energy, it flapped its minuscule wings, rising awkwardly into the air, struggling for balance. Luna watched, her gaze following its uncertain flight. The bird circled once, then twice, before gaining confidence and soaring higher, disappearing into the gray twilight. A tiny pang, a mixture of relief and a subtle, unbidden sadness, passed through Luna. She had done her part, and the bird was free. Her instinct to protect, dormant for so long, had proven itself still intact. This small act of quiet heroism did not go unnoticed. Across the alley, peering through the lace curtains of her tiny, well-kept apartment, an elderly woman with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun had witnessed the entire scene. Elena Petrov, known to the few remaining residents of the dilapidated neighborhood as Ba Elena, a beacon of unwavering kindness in a world increasingly devoid of it, had often left small bowls of kibble or scraps of meat for the solitary German shepherd. She had seen the sadness in Luna's eyes, the weariness in her gait, and had often wondered about the dog's past. Now, watching Luna curl protectively around the helpless bird, Ba Elena's heart swelled with a mixture of admiration and sorrow. She saw not a stray, but a creature of profound compassion and strength, a soul deserving of more than the harsh existence it had been dealt. A flicker of hope ignited within her. Perhaps, just perhaps, there was a way to help this noble creature. She made a mental note to bring Luna an extra portion of her homemade stew that evening, a small gesture of gratitude and recognition for the silent hero she had observed. As Luna settled back into her lonely vigil, the rain a mere memory on her fur, a familiar sensation prickled at her front left leg. It was a dull ache, a familiar throb that intensified with the cold and damp. Instinctively, she lowered her head and began to lick at the source of the discomfort, a long, faded scar, a jagged line running along her leg just above the paw. It was a significant scar, puckered and uneven, a permanent brand from a wound long since healed, yet its phantom pain remained. Each lick was a quiet exploration of the past, a tactile memory that stirred within her a kaleidoscope of images, flashing lights, urgent commands, the scent of fear and gunpowder, the thud of heavy footsteps. She saw, in the mind's eye, a younger, stronger version of herself, charging into danger, fearlessly protecting, serving. It was a life of purpose, of defined roles and unwavering loyalty. This scar was more than just a physical mark. It was a silent sentinel, guarding the echoes of a past filled with both glory and profound, untold tragedy. It was a constant, subtle reminder of the skills she possessed, the training that had shaped her, and the abrupt, brutal end to the life she had once known, a life that had been snatched away, leaving her to drift, forgotten, in the desolate landscape of the present. The details remained hazy, obscured by the fog of trauma and time, but the underlying feeling of loss, of having been discarded after giving her all, was a sharp, persistent ache in her heart, far deeper than the physical pain in her leg. This mysterious past, hinted at by the scar and the flicker of her forgotten instincts, lay dormant within her, a hidden power waiting for the right moment to be fully unveiled. The quiet melancholy that had become Luna's constant companion was about to be shattered, not by the gentle hand of kindness, but by the cruel indifference of humanity. This forgotten corner of the city, where crumbling brick met desperate green, was not immune to the shadows that crept from its fringes. A new blight was taking root, a festering sore of idleness and malice, embodied by a small gang of young men who roamed the streets with a predatory swagger. At their head was Radek, a youth whose eyes held the cold, calculating glint of a serpent, whose words were laced with venom, and whose actions were driven by a nihilistic boredom that sought only to destroy. He was a force of disruption, a cancerous growth on the already struggling community. His presence cast a long, disquieting shadow over the dwindling sense of security that remained in the neighborhood. Radek and his cohorts, a motley collection of impressionable youths eager to prove their toughness, had lately been scouting for a new lair. Their previous haunt, a derelict warehouse on the outskirts, had become too visible, too prone to the occasional, unwelcome patrols of the city's understaffed police force. They needed a place that was isolated, inconspicuous, a den where they could stash their pilfered goods, mostly small electronics, copper wire, and anything else of fleeting value, and plan their next petty schemes without interruption. Their eyes had fallen upon a cluster of abandoned row houses, their facades crumbling, their windows gaping like empty sockets, nestled deep within the forgotten alleys Luna called home. It was the perfect blend of seclusion and decay, a place where their illicit activities would go unnoticed. Luna, in her quiet patrols, had inadvertently become an obstacle in their path. Her presence, however harmless, was a nuisance. She was a silent sentry, a witness to their furtive movements, her very existence an annoying smudge on their carefully constructed tapestry of anonymity. Radek, in his twisted logic, saw her as a potential threat, a dog that might bark at the wrong moment, draw unwanted attention. He harbored a particular disdain for anything that challenged his control, even a weary old stray. He often observed her from a distance, a sneer twisting his lips, annoyed by her mere existence. That mangy beast, he'd muttered to his cronies, always lurking, always watching, needs to be taught a lesson. His words, devoid of pity, were promises of cruelty. The catalyst arrived on a night that mirrored the previous storm, though perhaps even more menacingly. The sky was a bruised purple, spitting a cold, biting rain that whipped through the narrow alleyways, moaning like a lost soul. Luna, seeking what little respite she could find, had curled herself into a tight ball near the crumbling foundation of one of the abandoned houses Radek had been eyeing. The faint scent of damp earth and decaying wood filled her nostrils, a familiar comfort in its decay. She was dreaming, perhaps, of sun-drenched fields and distant commands, when the jarring sound of heavy footsteps, accompanied by crude laughter and boisterous shouts, ripped her from her slumber. Rodek and two of his most eager followers, a lanky youth named Spike and a burly, dim-witted brute called Brick, were making their way through the alley. They were agitated, having just failed to pry open a secured garage door, their frustration a volatile fuel to their already short tempers. Their eyes, accustomed to the gloom, quickly spotted Luna, a dark shadow against the darker wall. "There it is," Spike cackled, a cruel grin splitting his face. "The old watchdog." Rodek's lips curled into a sneer. "Perfect. A little late-night entertainment, and a clear message for anyone who thinks they can interfere with our business." He approached Luna with a deliberate, menacing gait, his intention clear. The air around him seemed to grow heavy with ill intent. Luna, sensing the shift, felt a cold dread begin to coil in her stomach. Her ears flattened slightly, a low growl rumbling deep in her chest, a primal warning that was almost swallowed by the wind. But it was a hollow sound, devoid of the power it once held. Her muscles, stiff and protesting, yearned to flee, but a deep weariness held her rooted. "What's the plan, boss?" Brick grunted, his thick fingers already clenching into fists. Rodek surveyed Luna, his gaze lingering on her aged, matted fur. "We make an example of it. A warning. This is our territory now." He gestured towards the rusted pole of a defunct street lamp, its wires hanging like dead vines, standing starkly against the brick wall further down the alley. "Tie it there, and make sure it stays." Without another word, Spike produced a length of thick, frayed rope from his backpack. Luna, seeing the rope, felt a surge of ancient fear. She had known the feel of a leash, the comforting weight of a trainer's hand. This was different. This was a tool of confinement, of malice. She tried to scramble away, but her movements were sluggish, clumsy. Spike, surprisingly agile despite his lanky frame, lunged, grabbing her scruff roughly. Luna let out a yelp of surprise and pain, struggling desperately, her teeth snapping at the empty air as Brick moved to help hold her down. The two youths, stronger and younger, quickly overpowered her. They wrestled her towards the pole, her once proud body writhing in their grasp. Luna bit down, her old teeth finding only Spike's thick jacket sleeve. He cried out, more in annoyance than pain, and tightened his grip. The rope, rough and coarse, was quickly looped around her neck, then pulled taut and secured with several crude, tight knots to the cold, unyielding metal. The knot dug into her throat, restricting her breath, a searing pain lacing through her airways. Luna choked, gasping for air, her eyes wide with terror and a deep, soul-crushing despair. She pulled against the rope, straining every muscle in her body, but it held firm. Her claws scrabbled uselessly against the damp ground, leaving shallow furrows in the dirt. Her strength, already diminished by age and neglect, rapidly drained away. The old wound on her leg flared with a sharp, sickening throb, rendering her attempts to brace herself futile. Rodek watched, a flicker of cruel satisfaction in his eyes. "That'll teach it to wander where it doesn't belong," he said, kicking a loose stone that skittered across the wet ground. "Leave it. Let it think about its mistakes. No one will find it here for days. Maybe never." He chuckled, a harsh, grating sound that echoed in the dark alley. "What about food and water?" Boss Brick, with a flicker of something akin to unease in his dull eyes, ventured to ask. Rodek scoffed. "Let nature take its course. One less nuisance in the world. Besides, the message will be stronger that way." His words were delivered with chilling finality, a testament to his cold indifference. And with that, they left. Their footsteps faded into the distance, swallowed by the continuing drizzle and the oppressive silence of the alley. Luna was left alone, tethered to the pole, the rope burning against her neck, her breath coming in ragged, painful gasps. The cold, wet metal pressed against her side, seeping into her tired bones. Despair, a crushing, suffocating blanket, threatened to consume her entirely. The world seemed to shrink to the tight circle of rope around her throat, the endless ache in her body, and the relentless, chilling rain that plastered her fur to her skin. She lay there, shivering, her body growing colder, weaker. Her attempts to free herself became less frantic, more desperate. Each tug against the rope was a fresh wave of pain, a reminder of her utter helplessness. Tears, hot and involuntary, welled in her eyes, mingling with the rainwater on her face. This was it. Then, the ignominious end to a life that had once been filled with purpose, reduced to a slow, agonizing death in a forgotten alley. But amidst the suffocating despair, something else began to stir, a faint flicker, deep within her weary heart, a spark of defiance that refused to be extinguished. It was a memory of strength, of unwavering courage, of a time when retreat was not an option, an image, indistinct but powerful, of a younger Luna, facing down danger, protecting the innocent. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about more than that. It was about dignity, about the refusal to simply lie down and accept such a cruel fate. A low, guttural growl, almost imperceptible, rose from her chest, not of fear, but of a quiet, simmering rage. The instinct to survive, primal and fierce, began to battle against the encroaching darkness, pushing back against the despair. The physical pain was immense, but the internal fire, ignited by injustice and a deep-seated will to live, started to burn, faint but persistent. Luna was trapped, undeniably so. The knots were too tight, her strength too depleted. Escape, through her own means, was an impossibility. This was her new reality, a desolate, rain-soaked prison, and a slow, torturous path towards oblivion. The point of no return had been irrevocably crossed. There was no going back to the solitary, yet free, existence she had known. Her fate now hung precariously in the balance, dangling by a fraying rope in a dark, forgotten corner of the world. Days bled into one another, marked only by the shifting light of the sun that barely pierced the grime of the alley and the relentless, aching emptiness in Luna's stomach. Her body, once resilient, was now a canvas of pain and exhaustion. Her fur, once a source of pride, was plastered with dried mud and rainwater, stiff and uncomfortable against her skin. The rope, a constant torment, had chafed the skin around her neck raw, each movement a fresh agony. Her attempts to gnaw through it had long since ceased, her teeth too blunt, her strength too far gone. Hope, a fragile ember, had all but flickered out, replaced by a dull, persistent ache that settled deep in her bones. She was a silent, suffering monument to human cruelty. Her weak, occasional whimpers swallowed by the vast indifference of the city. The world had narrowed to the confines of her tether, a few feet of cracked asphalt, a damp, graffiti-scarred wall, and the cold, unyielding pole. She spent most of her time lying in a miserable heap, conserving what little energy remained, her eyes half closed against the weak sunlight or the drizzling rain. The sounds of the distant city, once a cacophony of life, now seemed like a mocking echo of a world that continued to turn without her. Hunger gnawed at her, a constant, sharp pang, but even that sensation was beginning to fade, replaced by a growing numbness. Her thirst was a dry, burning inferno in her throat, her tongue thick and uncooperative. Yet, even in the depths of her despair, a faint, almost imperceptible sound managed to pierce the fog of her suffering. It was a soft, gurgling babble, followed by the faint thud of tiny hands against pavement. Too weak to lift her head, Luna merely twitched an ear, a flicker of her old awareness. The sound was unfamiliar, innocent, entirely out of place in this desolate corner. Curiosity, a long-dormant instinct, stirred faintly within her. Slowly, agonizingly, Luna managed to lift her head, her neck muscles protesting with a sharp spasm. Her vision, blurred from weakness, struggled to focus. There, at the mouth of the alley, a tiny figure was emerging. It was a child, a baby, no more than 18 months old, crawling with the unsteady determination unique to toddlers. Lily, whose home bordered the alleyway, had escaped the watchful eye of her parents for a fleeting moment, drawn by an inexplicable curiosity towards the muffled, intermittent whimpers she'd heard. Her bright, inquisitive eyes, the color of the summer sky, scanned the gloom until they settled upon the dark, unmoving shape of Luna. Lily, oblivious to the danger, to the weariness, to the despair, saw only a large, furry creature. Her face, still round with baby fat, held a look of pure, unadulterated wonder. With a soft coo, she continued her wobbly crawl towards Luna, a tiny, determined explorer. Luna's breath hitched. A baby. Her instincts screamed at her to warn it away, to protect it from this place, from her own weakened state, from the lingering shadow of the boys who had left her here. A low growl, rough and painful, rumbled in her throat, a desperate attempt to deter the innocent creature. But it was a pathetic sound, devoid of menace, more akin to a whimper. Lily, however, seemed to interpret it differently. Her coos became more pronounced, her chubby legs propelling her forward with renewed enthusiasm. She reached Luna, her tiny hands reaching out, completely unafraid. Luna braced herself, expecting a poke, a rough pat, something that might stir the ingrained pain of human touch. Instead, Lily's fingers, surprisingly gentle, brushed against Luna's cold, wet nose. It was a touch so soft, so innocent, that it bypassed Luna's defenses entirely, bypassing the pain and the fear and plunging directly into the deepest recesses of her memory. A kaleidoscope of images flashed through Luna's mind, the warm, trusting weight of a child pressed against her side during a search and rescue mission, the soft pat of a small hand on her head after a successful training exercise, the joyous squeal of a child she had helped locate, their relief echoing in the grateful eyes of their parents. It was a lifetime of dedication, of protecting the vulnerable, of being a guardian. This tiny human, completely devoid of fear, rekindled a flame that Luna had thought long extinguished. Her body, despite its agony, felt a subtle, almost imperceptible surge of warmth, a connection to a purpose she had believed was lost forever. Lily giggled, a sound like wind chimes, and pulled her hand away, then reached into the pocket of her small, animal-printed overalls. With a determined effort, she pulled out a slightly crushed, half-eaten biscuit, a forbidden treat she'd smuggled from the kitchen. Her tiny fingers, sticky with crumbs, offered it to Luna. Luna gazed at the biscuit, then at Lily's innocent, expectant face. Hunger, sharp and insistent, flared through her. But it was quickly overshadowed by a more powerful emotion, a profound sense of protectiveness. This baby, offering her food, was dangerously close to a place of immense peril. She didn't want the biscuit. She wanted Lily to be safe. A soft whine escaped her, a sound of both deep affection and urgent warning. She tried to nudge the biscuit away with her nose, but Lily, with the stubbornness of all toddlers, pushed it closer. It was at that precise moment, as Lily's small hand held out the biscuit, that the silence of the alley was once again brutally interrupted. The scuff of familiar boots, the low murmur of callous voices, growing louder. Radek and his two cronies, Spike and Brick, were returning. They had come to gloat, to confirm that their cruel lesson was being learned, and perhaps to retrieve the rope once Luna had expired. Luna's head snapped up, her ears swiveling, her body tensing despite its weakness. A primal, protective instinct, sharp and pure, flooded through her. The sight of the three figures, swaggering into the alley, filled her with a renewed, cold fury. Look at that, Spike snickered, spotting the improbable tableau, the large chained dog and the tiny baby. The old beast has a friend. Rodek's sneer deepened. Looks like it's attracted more than just flies. Get that brat away from there. We don't need any witnesses. He took a step forward, his boot scuffing the ground, a menacing glint in his eye. Luna, seeing the encroaching danger, seeing the casual cruelty in Rodek's eyes, felt a shift. The weakness was still there. The pain was still there. But something else had risen to the surface. Something ancient and powerful. It was the legacy of her training, the unwavering courage of her breed, the burning desire to protect those who could not protect themselves. Her body might be failing, but her spirit, once broken, was now alight. With a final, desperate surge of strength, a guttural sound tore from Luna's throat. It was not the weak whimper she had made earlier, nor the futile growl. This was a bark, a deep, resonant, and incredibly powerful sound that reverberated through the narrow alley. It was a single, authoritative woof, sharp and commanding, carrying the unmistakable tone of a trained K9 unit. It was the sound of a warning, a declaration, a challenge. It was a sound that had once cleared rooms, halted suspects, and commanded respect. Lily, startled by the sudden, loud noise from the big dog, gasped and stumbled backward, her biscuit falling to the ground. Her lower lip began to tremble, but she didn't cry. She just looked at Luna with wide eyes. Rodek and his cronies, however, were momentarily stunned. The raw power and unexpected authority in that single bark cut through their bravado like a knife. Spike actually took a step back, his eyes wide. Brick, less prone to quick reactions, merely blinked, a flicker of confusion on his dull face. This wasn't the whimpering, dying dog they had left. This was something else entirely. The bark carried an echo of something formidable, something trained and dangerous. Rodek, always the quickest to recover, though clearly unsettled, quickly regained his composure. He forced a laugh, a harsh, brittle sound. Just a lucky shot, old dog, still a pathetic, mangy stray. He scoffed, trying to reassert his dominance. But the tremor in his voice was undeniable. He had seen enough to know this dog was not normal, that there was something more to her than met the eye. The controlled power in that bark, the unexpected shift in the dog's demeanor, even while clearly at death's door, was unnerving. A new idea, born of spite and a twisted sense of curiosity, began to form in Rodek's mind. If this dog was something more, then it would make an even better example. He wanted to break that spirit, to prove that even a legend could be reduced to nothing under his thumb. He smirked, his eyes narrowing to cruel slits. This beast ain't going anywhere, but it's not going to die easily, either. No, we'll have some fun with this. He turned to Spike and Brick, a chilling glint in his eye. Listen up. This isn't just about getting rid of a nuisance anymore. This is a test, a proper initiation. You two, he pointed at them. You finish it. Make sure it's done. And make it messy. Prove you're worthy of being with us. His voice was low, laced with a cold, almost surgical malice. He wanted them to commit to the act, to cross a line that would bind them to him. With that, Rodek turned and sauntered out of the alley, his swagger returning, leaving his two bewildered, slightly shaken, but ultimately compliant subordinates to their new, gruesome task. He wanted to observe from a distance, to enjoy the spectacle without getting his own hands dirty. The threat hung heavy in the air, a silent promise of violence yet to come. Luna, watching him go, felt a fresh wave of primal terror. Not for herself, but for the innocent life that had so unexpectedly stumbled into her bleak world. The confrontation had begun. The lines were drawn, and Luna, against all odds, was no longer just a victim. She was a defender, albeit a desperately weakened one. The true fight for her survival, and perhaps for the very soul of this forgotten alley, had just begun. The news of the chained German shepherd, initially a whispered rumor, quickly spread through the close-knit, though fearful, community. In a neighborhood where news traveled faster than the city's notoriously slow internet, the tale of the abandoned dog and the ominous presence of Rodek's gang had become a fresh source of anxiety. Most residents, weary from their own struggles and intimidated by Rodek's ruthless reputation, chose to look the other way. They had learned, through bitter experience, that intervention often led to more trouble than it was worth. However, not everyone was willing to turn a blind eye. But Elena, her heart heavy with concern after witnessing Luna's quiet heroism, was a woman forged of sterner stuff. Her small apartment, filled with the scent of dried herbs and simmering soups, became a quiet hub of distress. She had seen the dog's gentle nature, the flash of its noble past, and she knew in her soul that Luna deserved better than to die alone and suffering in a forgotten alley. She had tried to approach the police, but their response was a weary shrug, citing a lack of resources and the difficulty of dealing with stray dog issues in a high-crime area. Undeterred, Elena began to knock on doors, her voice a soft but persistent plea, attempting to rally her neighbors. "The poor creature," she'd plead, her eyes filled with an earnest sorrow. "She saved that little bird. Now she's suffering. We must do something." But her words met mostly with averted gazes and mumbled excuses. "It's Rodek." Elena," a young mother whispered, pulling her child closer. "You know what he's like. It's too dangerous." An elderly man shook his head, his face lined with resignation. "He'll just come back and make things worse for us. Let the dog go, or let it be." The fear of Rodek and his petty tyranny was a palpable force, a suffocating blanket that choked off any impulse towards collective action. Luna, therefore, remained a solitary figure in her suffering, a grim testament to the neighborhood's paralysis. The alley, a once insignificant stretch of forgotten concrete and crumbling brick, had now become a symbolic battleground. For Luna, it was the site of her deepest humiliation and abandonment, a stark reminder of her broken trust and fading strength. For Rodek, it was meant to be a stage for his power, a visible declaration of his dominion over the weak and the discarded. Its very decay amplified the sense of hopelessness, a fitting backdrop for the cruel spectacle Rodek intended to orchestrate. True to his word, Rodek dispatched his two chosen enforcers, Slim, a wiry youth with a malicious glint in his eye, and Butcher, a hulking figure whose brutish strength was matched only by his dim-witted obedience. They arrived at the alley with a slow, deliberate swagger, carrying lengths of discarded metal pipes and splintered wooden planks salvaged from nearby construction sites. These crude weapons were meant not just for inflicting harm, but for sending a clear, terrifying message. Their heavy boots crunched on the loose gravel, a percussive soundtrack to Luna's growing dread. "All right, old-timer," Slim sneered, his voice thin and sharp like a razor, as they approached the chained dog. "Boss says you need to learn your place." He nudged Luna with the toe of his boot, eliciting a weak whimper from her. Butcher, his face devoid of emotion, simply hefted his wooden plank, testing its weight. The air crackled with a malevolent energy. Luna, her body trembling, instinctively tried to recoil, but the rope held her fast, her eyes, filled with a mixture of terror and fierce determination, locked onto the approaching figures. She saw the malice in Slim's grin, the blank, unthinking brutality in Butcher's stance. Her mind screamed at her to fight, to unleash the fury that had once made her a formidable opponent. But her muscles screamed back, protesting, aching, refusing to obey with their former alacrity. She was a ghost of her former self, a legend trapped within a failing frame. Then, a sound. Faint at first, almost lost in the chill wind that gusted through the alley. It was a familiar gurgle, a happy babble, followed by the distinctive thud of tiny hands and knees against the concrete. Luna's head snapped towards the sound, her ears straining. Her heart, a weary drum, began to beat with a frantic, desperate rhythm. Lily, the tiny toddler, having once again slipped away from her momentarily distracted parents, had returned to the alley. Her bright, inquisitive eyes had spotted the large, dark shape of Luna, and with the boundless curiosity and lack of fear unique to her age, she was once again making her unsteady pilgrimage towards her furry friend. This time, however, Luna was not just weak. She was in immediate, mortal danger. Luna let out a desperate, pained whine, trying to convey the urgency, the danger, to the approaching child. "No, go back, run!" Her instincts screamed, but her voice was a broken thing. Lily, misinterpreting the sound, merely cooed, her small face lighting up with recognition as she saw Luna. She clapped her hands, a sound of innocent joy that tore at Luna's heart. Slim and Butcher stopped, their heads swiveling towards the sound. "What the—" Slim muttered, his cruel grin faltering for a moment. "The brat's back?" "Get it out of here," Butcher grunted, taking a step towards Lily. Luna's eyes, burning with a fierce, protective fire, watched every movement. She knew, with chilling certainty, that they wouldn't hesitate to harm the child if she interfered. Her body, however, was still rooted to the spot, bound by the cruel rope. A low, primal growl, deeper and more menacing than any she had made before, erupted from Luna's chest. It was a sound born of pure, unadulterated protectiveness, a warning that vibrated through the very air. Slim and Butcher paused, a flicker of apprehension crossing their faces. This dog, even in its weakened state, had a presence, a ferocity they hadn't anticipated. Then, Lily began to cry. Not a full-blown wail, but a soft, bewildered whimper. Her lower lip trembling as she finally sensed the tension, the unspoken threat in the air. The sight and sound of the baby's distress ignited something profound within Luna. The pain, the hunger, the weariness, all of it faded into insignificance. All that mattered was the innocent life before her, now threatened by the very darkness that had consumed Luna's own existence. Simultaneously, a new sound, faint but growing, drifted from the direction of Lily's house, the frantic shouts of parents. "Lily, Lily, where are you?" They were running, their voices laced with panic. They would be here in moments, but not quickly enough. Luna knew, with chilling clarity, that time was running out. She was completely alone, facing two dangerous men, with a vulnerable, crying child trapped between them. Every fiber of her being screamed to protect, to defend. The alley had become her final stand, a crucible where her broken spirit would either rise or be extinguished forever. The ultimate test had begun, and Luna, against all odds, was ready to fight. The air in the desolate alley thickened, charged with a palpable tension. The frantic shouts of Lily's parents, still distant but growing louder, served as a ticking clock, an auditory countdown to a confrontation that felt inevitable. Slim and Butcher, though momentarily taken aback by Luna's unexpected growl, quickly regained their predatory composure. They were accustomed to fear, to the cowering of the weak, and an old, half-starved dog, no matter how fierce its bark, was still just an animal. And this animal, crucially, was chained. "What are you waiting for? You idiots!" Slim hissed, his voice a sharp whip cracking through the silence. "Get the kid away and finish the job." He gestured impatiently with his metal pipe towards Lily, who, startled by the raised voices and the menacing figures, had stumbled backward a few steps. Her small face crumpled in confusion, her whimpers escalating into a soft, heartbroken sob. Butcher, with a grunt of assent, lumbered forward, his wooden plank held high, a crude weapon poised for a brutal strike. His dull eyes were fixed on Luna, not on the child. He saw only the order, the target. Lily, in her innocence, was an unwitting obstacle, easily pushed aside. Luna, however, was no longer just an old dog. The fear for Lily, a raw, protective instinct that transcended her own suffering, had ignited a spark that bypassed her failing body. Every ounce of her being was now singularly focused on one objective: protect the child. Her eyes, usually clouded with sorrow, blazed with an intensity that had been dormant for years, a fierce, unwavering resolve. It was the gaze of a guardian, a protector, a K-9 unit on active duty. The pain in her joints, the gnawing hunger, the suffocating thirst, all faded into the periphery, drowned out by the primal roar of her purpose. As Butcher lunged, his heavy boot kicking up loose gravel, Luna reacted. It was not the explosive, powerful lunge of a young, uninjured German shepherd, but a calculated, economical burst of movement. She coiled her weakened body, muscles screaming in protest, and with a guttural snarl that was more snarl than bark, she twisted. Her movement was surprisingly swift, a low, ground-hugging sweep that brought her head dangerously close to Butcher's right ankle. She didn't bite to wound. Not yet. She bit to disrupt, to create a moment of imbalance. Her old teeth, though dulled, found purchase on the thick fabric of Butcher's pants, just above his work boot. The surprise of the attack, combined with Luna's low center of gravity, caused Butcher to stumble. His heavy plank swung wildly, missing Luna by inches and instead striking the crumbling brick wall with a sickening crack. Dust and loose mortar rained down. Butcher, off balance, roared in frustrated surprise. "Arg, the beast bit me," he bellowed, hopping on one foot, momentarily distracted. Slim, startled by Butcher's uncharacteristic clumsiness, cursed and rushed forward to assist his companion. This was the opening Luna needed. Her chain, which had been a symbol of her imprisonment, now became an unexpected ally. As Butcher struggled, trying to regain his footing, Luna, with a sudden, powerful lurch, pulled taut against the rope. The momentum, combined with the slippery, damp ground, caused the already off-balance Butcher to trip. His legs tangled, and with a guttural roar, he crashed to the ground, his heavy frame landing with a jarring thud. The wooden plank flew from his grasp, skittering across the concrete. Slim, seeing his ally down, hesitated. The dog was acting like a trained animal, not a starving stray. A flicker of genuine fear, a rare emotion for him, crossed his face. He gripped his metal pipe tighter, his knuckles white. Luna, having sent Butcher sprawling, did not press her advantage with a physical attack. Her objective was not to maul, but to neutralize the immediate threat to Lily. She shifted her weight, maintaining the tension on the rope, keeping Butcher tangled and disoriented. Her eyes, still burning with fierce light, now fixed on Slim. A low, menacing growl rumbled continuously in her throat, a promise of what would happen if he dared approach Lily. Slim, unnerved, took a cautious step back. "Stay back. Dog," he snarled, trying to sound authoritative, but his voice cracked slightly. He raised his metal pipe, trying to intimidate her. It was a standoff, a crippled, chained dog against a younger, armed man, but the dog held the tactical advantage. Luna, despite her weakness, radiated an aura of controlled power, of a latent violence that could be unleashed. She knew the importance of body language, of projecting unwavering dominance. Every muscle in her emaciated frame was tensed, ready to react. Then, Lily, still whimpering softly, made a sound, a tiny, almost imperceptible sniffle. It was enough. The sound seemed to pierce through the tension, reminding Luna of the fragility she was protecting. Just as Slim was about to make his move, deciding to bypass the dog and grab the child, Luna unleashed her true, terrifying power. It was not a physical attack, but an auditory one. A deep, chest-rattling roar tore from her lungs. It wasn't a bark, not a growl, but a sound that combined the ferocity of a wolf's snarl with the commanding resonance of a military dog's attack command. It was loud, shockingly so, reverberating off the brick walls of the alley, a primal sound of pure, unadulterated aggression. The sound was meticulously trained, designed not just to intimidate, but to psychologically disarm, to instill instantaneous, unthinking terror. Slim, unprepared for such a deafening, terrifying sound from an animal he believed to be at death's door, actually yelped. His eyes, wide with sudden, genuine panic, darted around wildly. The sound seemed to disorient him, to short-circuit his meager courage. He dropped his metal pipe with a clang, his hands instinctively flying up to cover his ears. He stumbled backward, his bravado utterly shattered, colliding with the still-recovering butcher. The scene froze for a breathtaking, agonizing moment. Luna, tethered but triumphant, stood over the prone butcher, her eyes fixed on the retreating Slim, her chest heaving with the effort of her roar. Lily, her tiny hands covering her own ears, had stopped crying, watching the spectacle with wide, astonished eyes. It was in this suspended moment that the parents arrived. Lily's father, a burly man named David, burst into the alley, his face a mask of terror. His wife, Sarah, followed close behind, her hand clamped over her mouth to stifle a scream. Behind them, drawn by the commotion and by Elena's persistent pleas, a small contingent of neighbors had gathered at the alley's mouth, peering in with a mixture of fear and morbid curiosity. They saw it all. Slim, scrambling backward, his face ashen, tripping over his own feet. Butcher, still groaning on the ground, tangled in the rope that had once bound Luna. And Luna, the old starved German shepherd, standing firm, radiating an aura of unwavering protectiveness. Her gaze fixed on the fleeing men, a low, triumphant growl rumbling deep in her chest. "Lily!" Sarah cried, rushing forward and scooping up her daughter, pulling her into a fierce, trembling embrace. David, seeing his daughter safe, turned his furious gaze on Slim and Butcher. But before he could react, the wail of police sirens pierced the air, growing rapidly louder. Ba Elena, having finally convinced a young rookie officer to investigate, had called them just moments after Radek's initial threat. 2 police cruisers screeched to a halt at the alley's entrance, their blue and red lights strobing through the gloom, painting the chaotic scene in garish flashes. "Police freeze!" a stern voice boomed through a megaphone. Slim, seeing the police, let out a terrified shriek and made a desperate dash for escape, scrambling over a low wall into an adjacent yard. But he was no match for the trained officers, who quickly cornered and apprehended him. Butcher, still struggling to untangle himself, was easily taken into custody. The alley, moments before a stage for brutality, was now a scene of bustling activity. Officers moved with practiced efficiency, securing the suspects, taking statements. But amidst the controlled chaos, all eyes eventually turned to Luna. She was still standing, though her legs visibly trembled from exhaustion, her old body pushed to its absolute limits. Lily, safe in her mother's arms, reached out a small hand towards Luna, her tears now replaced by a curious awe. Luna, seeing Lily safe, and the threat neutralized, slowly, cautiously, lowered herself to the ground. Her eyes, still bright, met David's, then Sarah's. There was no fear, only a profound weariness and a quiet pride. The transformation on the faces of the gathered crowd was profound. They had come expecting to see a tragedy, perhaps a dead dog, or worse. Instead, they had witnessed an act of raw, improbable heroism. The initial fear on their faces slowly melted away, replaced by a dawning comprehension, then by stunned admiration. A collective gasp rippled through the onlookers as they realized what had truly transpired. This wasn't just a stray dog, this was a guardian, a protector, a force of nature that had risen from the ashes of abandonment to defend an innocent life. A young woman in the crowd, her hand pressed to her mouth, began to openly weep. Others followed, tears streaming down their faces, tears of relief, of awe, of deep, profound emotion. They saw not just the dog's courage, but the pure, unyielding love that had driven her. They saw the injustice of her past, the nobility of her present. The silent acknowledgement passed between them. This old, broken dog was a hero, and her silent victory, achieved against all odds, was not just her vindication, but a powerful affirmation for them all. The alley, once a symbol of their apathy, now bore witness to a miracle, etched forever in the hearts of those who saw it. The harsh fluorescent lights of the police station cast a sickly pallor on Slim and Butcher's faces as they sat in separate interrogation rooms, their earlier bravado replaced by sullen fear. The swift, decisive arrival of the police had caught them completely off guard, and the terrifying roar of the old German shepherd had rattled them to their core. Under persistent questioning, their story, though disjointed and riddled with self-serving excuses, quickly pointed to one individual, Radek. The officers, who had been building a case against Radek's petty criminal activities for weeks, now had the solid evidence they needed. The reports of animal cruelty and endangering a child provided the necessary leverage. Within hours, a warrant was issued, and a focused hunt for Radek began, turning the tables on the neighborhood's self-proclaimed tyrant. News of the arrests and the ongoing search for Radek rippled through the community like a cleansing wave. The initial fear began to dissipate, replaced by a quiet, burgeoning sense of relief and defiance. Neighbors who had once averted their eyes now spoke openly of Radek's past transgressions, their hushed whispers transforming into emboldened testimonies. The collective apathy that had chained them as surely as Luna had been chained to the pole began to crumble. This act of heroism by an old, abandoned dog had inadvertently sparked a revolution of courage within the community, encouraging them to reclaim their streets from the shadows that had haunted them. Meanwhile, in the warm embrace of Lily's home, a different kind of healing had begun. David and Sarah, still reeling from the terrifying near miss with their daughter, watched Luna with a mixture of awe and profound gratitude. Lily, completely unafraid, had gravitated towards Luna as soon as the police had unchained her, her tiny hand instinctively reaching out to stroke the dog's matted fur. Luna, no longer cowering, had leaned into the touch, a soft rumble of contentment in her chest. The connection between the baby and the old dog was undeniable, almost magical. "We can't just leave her," Sarah had whispered to David later that evening, watching Luna sleep curled on a makeshift blanket by the living room window, her side still heaving slightly. "She saved our Lily." David, a practical man whose heart was nonetheless deeply moved, nodded. "You're right. She's earned her place here." It was a decision made not just out of gratitude, but out of a deep respect for the animal's unwavering spirit. The very next morning, Luna received her first taste of genuine care in years. David carefully unfastened the rope from her neck, revealing the raw, angry chafing beneath. The sight alone brought tears to Sarah's eyes. They took her to the local veterinarian, a kind, older woman named Dr. Anya, who had long served the struggling community. Dr. Anya's examination was thorough, her movements gentle. She cleaned Luna's wounds, administered antibiotics, and gave her fluids. As she meticulously shaved around the large scar on Luna's front left leg, her brow furrowed. "This isn't a normal injury," she murmured, tracing the jagged outline. "Looks like an old bullet wound, or shrapnel, healed badly." She ran some scans, taking note of the numerous old fractures and healed breaks that spoke of a life lived through significant trauma and extreme physical exertion. Later, as Luna rested peacefully in the clinic, a new patient file opened before her. Dr. Anya cross-referenced the unique details of Luna's scar and a faint, almost imperceptible microchip she had scanned near Luna's shoulder blade. The information that flashed across her screen made her gasp. Luna was not just any German shepherd. She was Canine 734 Luna, a retired police service dog with a distinguished, albeit truncated, record. Her file, marked highly classified, detailed years of valorous service in search and rescue, narcotics detection, and even a deployment in a war-torn region, where she had been critically injured. The scar on her leg was indeed from a combat-related incident, a hero's badge. Her last known handler had been killed in action, and in the chaos that followed. Luna had been inadvertently lost in the system, declared unfit for further service due to her injuries, and, tragically, simply left behind. The realization hit Dr. Anya like a physical blow. This noble creature, a true hero, had been abandoned and left to rot. Dr. Anya immediately contacted the organization listed in Luna's file, Retired K9 Heroes, a non-profit dedicated to ensuring old service dogs receive the care and dignified retirement they deserved. Within hours, the organization responded with eager assistance, offering to cover all of Luna's medical expenses and provide ongoing support. They were overjoyed to have found one of their lost heroes. Back at Lily's home, with Luna now resting comfortably, David, Sarah, and Ba Elena sat together on the small, worn couch, sipping tea. The news of Luna's past, shared by Dr. Anya over the phone, hung in the air, a mixture of profound sadness and overwhelming pride. A canine dog, David mused, shaking his head slowly. That explains the bark, and how she handled those thugs. Sarah reached over and stroked Luna's head gently. She risked everything for Lily. It's like she found her purpose again, right when she needed it most. Her voice was thick with emotion. Ba Elena, her eyes soft with wisdom, nodded slowly. Kon bei janin thai, jiu gijo trong luna ma chung ta ja quen mat, she said, her voice quiet but resonant. The little one saw something in Luna that we had forgotten. She paused, gazing out at the alley, now cleaner, emptier, its dark corners less menacing. Sometimes, the greatest glory is not in what we achieve, but in the simple act of choosing to do what is right, even when no one is watching. And sometimes, the most magnificent souls are found in the most unexpected places, hidden in plain sight, waiting for a chance to shine again. She shifted, looking at Luna, then at David and Sarah. Luna knew she was alone, neglected. She knew pain. But when she saw Lily, she didn't see an opportunity for food or escape. She saw innocence that needed protecting. That's her true nature. And your Lily, in her innocence, saw only a friend, not a forgotten stray. It was Lily's pure heart that unveiled Luna's true heroism. David and Sarah looked at each other, then back at Luna, who was now stirring slightly, her eyes blinking open, a calm, trusting gaze meeting theirs. There was no longer the haunted look of a forgotten soul, but a flicker of contentment, a hint of peace. The alley, once a symbol of their apathy and despair, was now etched in their minds as the place where a silent hero had returned, bringing with her not just salvation, but a profound lesson in courage, compassion, and the enduring power of unconditional love. A new calm had descended upon their home, and upon the alley itself, a quiet testament to the enduring strength found in unexpected places. 1 year later, the dusty, forgotten alleys where Luna once roamed, a ghost among shadows, had transformed. The grime seemed lighter, the air less heavy with neglect. This transformation was subtle, born not of grand city initiatives, but of a quiet, collective renewal sparked by a single act of courage. And at the heart of this enduring change was Luna, no longer a forgotten stray, but the cherished cornerstone of Lily's bustling, joyful home. Luna's coat, once dull and matted, now gleamed with health, brushed regularly until it shone like polished mahogany and black velvet. Her old wounds had healed completely, though the significant scar on her front leg remained, a proud, tangible badge of her extraordinary past. The stiffness in her gait had eased, replaced by a comfortable, if still deliberate, walk. Her eyes, once brimming with an ancient sorrow, now held a deep, serene contentment, reflecting the warmth and security that had become her daily reality. She was no longer just the dog. She was a beloved member of the family, her presence an unwavering anchor of quiet strength. Lily, now a bright-eyed toddler of 2.5, was Luna's constant shadow and dearest companion. Their bond was a silent symphony of pure affection. Lily would often lean against Luna's warm side as she played with her brightly colored blocks, her small hand instinctively reaching out to stroke the soft fur behind Luna's ears. Luna, in turn, watched over Lily with an almost human vigilance, a gentle nudge of her nose or a soft, reassuring whine always there when Lily stumbled or cried. Their laughter, intertwined, often filled the air, a melodic testament to their profound connection. Luna, once alone, was now truly home, her every need met with boundless love and gentle care. The ripple effect of Luna's story extended far beyond the confines of Lily's yard. Radek, the orchestrator of Luna's suffering, had faced the full weight of justice. His past petty crimes, combined with the charges of animal cruelty and endangering a child, led to a significant prison sentence. His gang, deprived of their leader and rattled by the decisive police action, quickly dissolved, their malevolent presence replaced by the quiet hum of ordinary life returning to the neighborhood. The alley, once a symbol of his tyranny, was now just an alley, no longer a place of fear. Inspired by Luna's resilience and driven by their gratitude, David and Sarah, with the unwavering support of Lena, had established a small, community-driven nonprofit Kwai Luna, the Luna Fund. Operating from a small, renovated storefront donated by a sympathetic local business owner, the fund was dedicated to rescuing and rehabilitating abused and neglected dogs, particularly those with a history of service. They worked tirelessly, raising awareness, hosting adoption events, and lobbying for stronger animal protection laws. Luna, though officially retired, became the fund's gentle ambassador. She would occasionally accompany David or Sarah to events, her calm demeanor and the quiet dignity in her eyes speaking volumes to those who heard her story. News articles about the hero German Shepherd who saved a baby against all odds had spread, reaching far beyond their local community, bringing in donations and volunteers from across the country. Luna's image, a silhouette against a rising sun, became the fund's logo, a symbol of hope and second chances. The most heartwarming aspect of the fund's work was its focus on finding dignified retirements for other canine heroes who, like Luna, had been lost or forgotten. One such success story was Titan, a scarred police dog struggling with PTSD, whom Luna, with a gentle nudge and a silent understanding, seemed to help heal. Their friendship, a testament to shared experiences and unspoken bonds, became another powerful narrative for the fund. Luna, once the recipient of a second chance, was now actively giving them to others, embodying the very spirit of paying it forward. As the sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in hues of fiery orange and soft lavender, Luna lay curled at the foot of Lily's bed. Lily, clutching a worn stuffed animal, was fast asleep, her breathing soft and even. Luna's eyes, full of a tranquil peace, watched the first few stars begin to twinkle in the darkening sky, each one a tiny pinprick of hope in the vast expanse. Her life had come full circle, from the quiet despair of abandonment to the boundless joy of unconditional love and a renewed purpose. She had found her spring, her new beginning, and in doing so, had helped countless others find theirs. It was a silent, profound triumph, etched in the quiet pulse of her heart and the gentle rhythm of Lily's breath beside her. The stars outside seemed to shimmer a little brighter, whispering a timeless tale of courage, kindness, and the profound transformative power of one small, innocent act. If this story stirred your heart, if it reminds you that courage can alter destinies and that light always finds a path even in the deepest darkness, please leave a comment. Share this story with those who need inspiration. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell to never miss our upcoming stories.